Welcome back to another episode, and we are continuing our history of the Knights Templar. So far, we've seen how we are at the beginning of the creation of the Knights Templar, of this new organization that went under the protectorate of the church and have also exclusive rights and benefits to fight and to establish the kingdoms and the presence of Christianity in the Middle East. We've seen how the Council of Troyes marked the beginning of a new era for the Order of the Temple. Soon, the fame of these new Knights of God spread across Europe. After the council, everything changed, and rapidly, this new order sparked hope and interest throughout the West. They were closely watched, especially by the European aristocracy, who recognized that donations to the Templars served a different purpose than those given to traditional monastic orders. As a result, offerings to the Order of the Temple grew quickly and steadily. Just within a few years, after 1130, the Templars had become a recognized power in the Middle East and were expanding their influence in the West. They had become the first permanent army in Europe since the Roman Empire, after the fall of Rome in the 5th century. Nothing like this was ever seen in Western Europe for 600 or 700 years. It was a radical shift in the Holy Land. There now existed a standing military force dedicated to defending Christianity and Christian interests. The Templars received donations of money and land which they used to arm and train themselves. In the Middle Ages, a knight held tactical importance that we now associate with a tank. Just imagine how expensive it was to armor a knight, their whole entire armor, their weapons, their horse. There was a considerable expense, and they also were seen as an asset for lords, for kings, to have a number, the cavalry. A mounted warrior clad in iron was both a real threat and a psychological weapon. These were the elite troops, the special forces of the 12th century. It was during this period that the Templars adopted the symbols that would make them recognizable and eventually formed the foundation of their legendary status as exceptional warriors. Initially, their clothing was very simple, in keeping with their name, poor fellow soldiers of Christ, and they truly were poor. They owned nothing but a plain robe, a sword, and a few horses. After the Council of Troyes, with the influx of donations in land and money, they found themselves managing immense wealth. It was then that they adopted the white mantle, a new uniform rich in symbolic meaning. In the medieval world, the white symbolized purity. The long white cloak with the red cross represented the vows they had taken. The red color clearly referred to the blood of Christ, shed for the redemption of humanity. It symbolized the Templars' commitment to make the ultimate sacrifice, shedding their own blood in defense of the Holy Land and the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The Templars' primary mission was to defend the Holy Land. For this, training alone was not enough. They needed new weapons, organized logistics, and fortified structures. Thanks to these donations, the Order of the Temple could invest in recruitment. The order was structured into 3 ranks. The most well-known was that of the Knight Brothers, recruited in Western Europe, often from aristocratic families. These men were already trained in mounted combat and had had all the skills needed to fulfill their role within the order. Those who did not come from noble backgrounds but were still free men, often from artisan or merchant families, entered the order as sergeants. While they could fight when needed, their primary roles were as carpenters or property managers. They were known as the Brothers of Trade. The third rank was that of the Chaplains, ordained priests who oversaw the spiritual life of the order. When a recruit joined the order of the Knights Templar, they unlocked solemn commitments, symbolically represented during the consecration ceremony. The most significant moment was when they were dressed in the white robe and mantle, typical of the Templars, symbolizing their physical and spiritual entry into the brotherhood of the temple. Immediately afterward, they pronounced the vows outlined in the rule: chastity, poverty, and obedience, followed by the oath to fight with all their strength for the defense of the Holy Land. This oath was so important that it was often referred to as the Templars' fourth vow. Regardless of their rank, knight, sergeant, or chaplain, and whether they were in the east or the west, every Templar contributed to the defense of the Holy Land. It was a true initiation ceremony, an entry into a sacred world, hence the importance of the mantle, the sword, and the oath. Gradually, the order's houses, known as commanderies, began to spread across Europe. These were like monasteries where the brothers followed the rule and prepared for a single mission: to train for combat and grow the order's wealth to fund actually the holy war. A commandery was a large building similar to a house with shared spaces, a granary for food supplies, and most importantly, a chapel. A commandery was only considered such if a chaplain could celebrate religious services for the brothers. In regions like Champagne, Burgundy, and Ile-de-France, saw the rise of monasteries and farms managed by the Templars. There was one every 30 to 40 kilometers, we could say every 15-20 miles. A network that grew rapidly in the 12th century. Now, these commanderies and these centers of the Knights Templars also served as recruitment centers and had a real impact on local communities, forming relationships with the populations that supplied them. In the year 1136, Hugh de Pan, our first master of the order, the founder, died shortly after returning from the Middle East. He was succeeded by Robert de Craon, who demonstrated great operational and administrative skill. Under his leadership, the commanderies continued to grow, fueled by ongoing donations. 10 years after the Council of Troyes, the transformation of the Templar order was unstoppable. On March 29, 1139, Pope Innocent II issued a papal bull that would go down in history. The document bearing his seal became known as Omne Datum Optimum, named after the opening words of the text. And he mentions in this papal bull, "Every good grace and every perfect gift comes from above, from the Father of lights, with whom there is no change, nor shadow, or turning." The bull urged the faithful to take up arms against the enemies of the cross. It declared that any spoils of war the Templars acquired could be kept entirely by them. No one had the right to claim a portion. He formally established the Order of the Temple and placed all its possessions granted by popes, kings, and princes under the protection of the Holy Church. But this papal bull did more than just legitimize the Templars' wealth. He placed them under the direct authority of the Pope himself. "No one shall compel you to pay tributes. We confirm your right to collect tithes with the consent of the bishops, and so that nothing may be lacking from the complete salvation of your souls and your access to the sacraments of the Holy Church. You are permitted to welcome priests and clerics into your order. You are authorized to build chapels in areas connected to your seats, where you may hold religious services. If one of you should die, he may be buried there. It will be unseemly for the brothers of the order on their way to church to mingle with crowds of sinners where men and women mix." Well, from this moment on, the Order of the Temple no longer paid tributes to the Church. They had the right to collect tithes independently, maintain their own clergy, and build their own churches. Anyone who challenged this papal protection risked excommunication. The Templars were no longer subject to any religious authority other than the Pope. This granted them extraordinary autonomy and freedom of action, at least in relation to the ecclesiastical hierarchy. But it also stirred resentment among bishops and other clergy, who viewed the order's independence as excessive and outside of their control. In the years that followed, other popes reinforced the privileges granted to the Templars. In 1144, Pope Celestine II issued the bull Milites Templi, inviting the faithful to support the Templars' mission and declaring that he would grant indulgences to all benefactors of the order. He who has given them goods that God has deemed them worthy of, and who has established a bond with this holy brotherhood, allowing them to benefit from it, shall each year see his penances reduced by 1/7. What do you expect? Kings across Europe granted the Templars vast tracts of land. But the order also received smaller donations, estates, farms, wealth. The Templars accepted any offering, no matter how modest. No donation was too large or too small, because everything served the higher purpose of preserving the Christian kingdom in the Holy Land. For the faithful, donating to the sacred order was a meritorious act. It promised spiritual rewards, shortening one's time in purgatory and securing God's forgiveness. In the year 1145, a new papal bull granted the Templars the right to establish their own cemeteries, forbearing their brothers, and to travel freely across Europe. Well, in this episode, we've seen how after their initial creation and the establishment of the organization with the first headmaster of the Knights Templar, Hugh de Pan, mingling the spiritual aspect with these fighting monks that actually would just go in the Middle East and wage war to defend the holy sites on behalf of the Pope and Christianity itself. They were a symbol. They were a strong symbol. And according to the Pope, back then, they were supported by all means, to the point where if you do not agree with what they do or you're against them, well, you risk excommunication. And if you donate, well, we can reduce your penance by 1/7, and we can grant you a way we can ease your passage through purgatory and actually send you to heaven when you reach the afterlife. And these threats somehow, or these incentives, worked very well at the time because they were a motivating factor for the Pope to maintain Christianity cohesive and united, and at the same time encourage these nobles to donate more, using the Knights Templars as a proxy army, if you will. Like, if you think about it, the Christianity could not wage war itself as a spiritual Catholic religious front. They would use the Templars to actually do their job, this kind of job in the name of Christianity for them. Most likely, I suppose we could say that the presence of the Crusaders in the Middle East was a form of proxy war to facilitate the reconquista of all those territories and free the areas from Muslim domination. We could easily say that it was a war of religion. Well, I'll leave you with this, and we will catch on the next episode, episode 5, next time. Thank you for following up. I'll see you next time.